There is a moment that happens inside an avoidant that almost no one ever gets to see. It is not a dramatic moment. It does not happen during a big conversation or a romantic gesture or anything they could point to afterward and say, "That was the moment everything shifted." It happens quietly, usually when they are alone, usually when they are thinking about someone specific, and it feels, for the first time in possibly their entire adult life, like something they cannot outrun. Not because that person is chasing them, because that person is not. That person is completely, genuinely, almost frustratingly fine without them. And that specific combination, being seen completely, being wanted genuinely, and being needed not at all, does something to the avoidant that no amount of love, no amount of patience, no amount of pursuit has ever been able to do. It cracks them open. And today I'm going to show you exactly who that person is, exactly what they do differently, and exactly why you might already be closer to being them than you think. But first I need to tell you something about avoidance that most content in this space gets wrong. And it's the piece that changes everything once you understand it. Avoidants do not have a love problem. They have a safety problem. I want you to really sit with that distinction because it reframes the entire dynamic. An avoidant is not someone who experiences love differently from you. They are someone for whom love and danger got fused together at a neurological level, very early, before they had the language to understand what was happening. As children, the people they needed most were the same people who were unavailable, dismissive, or inconsistent. And the child's brain, which is not yet equipped to say this adult has an emotional limitation, does what all children's brains do when a caregiver fails. It turns inward. It decides the problem must be the need itself. Needing love is what created the pain. So the solution is to need less. Need nothing if possible. Build a self that functions entirely on its own internal resources and never again becomes vulnerable to the withdrawal of someone else's warmth. And that child, over years, becomes very good at this. Remarkably good. They are competent, self-sufficient, fascinating, often, because people who cannot depend on others develop extraordinary inner lives. They become capable of depth, capable of intensity, capable of connection, briefly, when the safety conditions are right. And then they retreat. Not because they wanted to, because their nervous system detected the signal. This is getting close, this is getting real, this is the place where it starts to hurt, and fired the only alarm it was ever taught to fire. Get out, get distance, get back to the only place that ever felt safe, themselves. So when you love an avoidant and they pull away, they are not rejecting you. They are executing the only survival strategy their nervous system ever learned, and no amount of love poured on top of that survival strategy has ever dissolved it. Not once. Not in the history of human relationships. Love is not the right tool for this particular job, and understanding why will explain everything about who can actually reach them. Now I want to introduce you to a specific type of person. I'm going to call this person the anchor empath. Not because they hold anyone down, because they hold themselves. And that distinction is the entire game. Most people in this world walk around looking for something. Security, validation, confirmation that they matter, that they are lovable, that their emotional experience is real and legitimate. They are scanning constantly for external data points that confirm what they cannot yet fully confirm for themselves. And there's nothing shameful about this. It is the default human condition. We are wired for connection, and connection requires responsiveness from others, and most of us learned imperfectly in environments that were sometimes responsive and sometimes not, to hunger a little for that responsiveness, to track it, to feel its presence or absence like a temperature change in the room. The anchor empath went through that same process. They are not built from different material. They felt that hunger. They tracked that temperature. They probably spent years in relationships where they gave too much, felt too much, lost themselves too much. They likely loved people who could not receive what they were offering and offered more anyway, hoping volume would close the distance. They know that loop. They have lived inside it. The difference is they did something about it. They went back into the history of their own emotional patterns and they found the root. The original place where their sense of worthiness got tangled up with other people's responses to them. And they did the slow, unglamorous, frequently uncomfortable work of untangling it. Not perfectly, Not completely, but enough. Enough that when someone pulls away from them now, their first response is no longer panic. It is curiosity. Not, what did I do wrong, but what is happening for them? And that shift, from self-audit to genuine curiosity about the other person, is the foundation everything else is built on. Here is what the anchor empath does in the presence of an avoidant that no other relational type does. And I want to be specific, because this is where most content loses the thread. The anchor empath makes the avoidant feel completely visible without making them feel trapped by being seen. Let me tell you what that means in practice. Because visibility is a word that gets used softly, and it's actually something quite precise and quite rare, when you can really see someone, not the version they perform, not the surface they present to manage how others perceive them, but the actual architecture underneath, the fears they've never said out loud, the patterns they know they run but can't stop running, the gap between who they want to be and who they sometimes are. When someone sees all of that and their face does not change, their warmth does not reduce, their interest does not convert into a project to fix you, that experience is unlike anything else a human being can encounter. For most people it's rare. For an avoidant, it is almost mythological, because the avoidant has spent their entire life making sure no one sees the architecture underneath. They have become expert at revealing just enough to seem open while concealing the parts that feel unacceptable. And it has worked. For years it has worked. And it has been profoundly, quietly, exhaustingly lonely. The anchor empath sees through the performance without making it a confrontation. They don't announce what they see. They don't use their perception as leverage. They simply respond to what is actually there, not to what is being presented. And the avoidant, who has been managing impressions their entire life and is very good at detecting when someone is responding to the managed impression versus the real thing, notices. They feel it somewhere in the nervous system before they have a conscious thought about it. That this person is talking to them, not the version they curated, them. And for the first time, the most terrifying thing imaginable, being truly known, starts to feel like the most desired thing imaginable. But here is where it gets counterintuitive, and this is the part you need to really understand. The anchor empath sees the avoidant clearly, and then does nothing with that information. They don't lean in harder. They don't ask probing questions designed to pull the real person out. They don't make the avoidant's hidden interior into a destination they are trying to reach. They simply see it and stay. Warm, grounded, present, and completely occupied with their own life. And that combination, you are seen, you are not pursued because of it, is the paradox that dismantles every defense the avoidant has ever built. Because every defense they built was against being seen and then captured, seen and then needed, seen and then made responsible for someone else's emotional survival. The anchor empath removes the second half of that equation, and without the threat, the armor has nothing to protect against. An armor that has no threat to face is very, very heavy to keep wearing. Let me show you what this looks like in a real sequence of events. Because I want you to feel this, not just understand it. A man, we'll call him Daniel, has been emotionally unavailable his entire adult life. He knows it. He's been told by 4 different people across 12 years of relationships. He's been in therapy. He understands the architecture of his avoidance with remarkable intellectual clarity. He can explain attachment theory. He knows where it came from. And he still retreats. Every single time it gets real. Because knowledge is not the same as nervous system reprogramming. And his nervous system is still running the original software. Closeness equals danger. Distance equals safety. Every time it trips, no matter what his conscious mind knows, his body executes the protocol. He creates space. He goes quiet. He finds reasons to be busy. He waits for the other person to either pursue him, which confirms the danger, or leave, which confirms the other old story, that closeness always ends in loss. Either way, the belief gets reinforced. Either way, he ends up alone. And alone is familiar. Alone is the place the software considers home base. Then he meets someone. A woman. We'll call her Maya. And Maya is warm in a way he can feel from the first conversation. Not the performed warmth of someone trying to create an impression, but the kind that seems to come from something interior. From a person who has found something worth being warm about in their own life, and it simply spills outward. He notices it. He is drawn to it, in a way he finds slightly annoying because he recognizes the pull,
and he has learned to be suspicious of pulls. He pulls back slightly, tests the dynamic, and Maya doesn't pursue. She doesn't go cold either, she just remains. Warm, occupied, present, in a way that doesn't require anything from him. She texts him something funny 3 days later. No reference to the 3 days, no undertone of hurt, just, "Here is a thing, I thought of you, and I'm fine either way." And Daniel reads that message 4 times. Not because he's uncertain about the words,
Because something in the texture of it is completely foreign to him, and his brain is trying to classify it. Is this a strategy? Is this someone who has learned not to show need? Is this indifference dressed up as warmth? And the answer to all 3 questions is no, and he doesn't know what to do with no. 3 weeks pass. The energy between them has that strange charge that sometimes exists in the gap between 2 people who are both paying attention without saying so. She doesn't ask him what they are. She doesn't bring up where this is going. She doesn't send the message that half his previous partners sent at this stage, the one that feels like a gentle ultimatum dressed in vulnerability language. She is just living her life, fully, with apparent genuineness, and including him in parts of it without making his inclusion feel like a test he could fail. And Daniel, who has outrun every person who has ever tried to hold on to him, finds himself doing the one thing his entire behavioral history suggested he was incapable of doing. He moves toward her, voluntarily, without being pulled, without a single pursuit behavior on her part. He moves toward her because for the first time in possibly his entire adult life, moving towards someone does not feel like walking into a trap. That is what the anchor empath does. Not through strategy, not through technique, through the structural reality of who they have become. Now I want to talk about something most people in this conversation never address, and it is the most important part. There is a version of this dynamic that looks like the anchor empath, but is actually its shadow. It is the person who has learned to suppress their needs in the hope that invisibility will keep someone close. It is the person who gives space not from genuine okayness, but from fear. Fear that asking for anything will trigger the retreat, so they preemptively silence themselves. This person looks from the outside like the anchor empath. They don't chase, they give space, they stay warm. But the interior is different. The interior is a person holding their breath. And the avoidant feels the difference, not consciously. But the avoidance nervous system, which has been calibrated since childhood to detect threat and inauthenticity, reads the held breath. Reads the performance of security underneath the actual anxiety. And rather than feeling the safety they need, they feel something close but wrong, like a key that almost fits the lock but doesn't quite turn. And they retreat again, and the shadow empath believes it is because they weren't patient enough. They weren't loving enough. They didn't give enough space. And they give more. And the avoidant retreats further. And the cycle that was supposed to be different becomes the same cycle with a different costume. The distinction between the anchor empath and the shadow empath is not behavior, it is origin. The anchor empath gives space because they genuinely have a full life to return to. The shadow empath gives space because they are afraid of what asking for presence will cost them. The anchor empath stays warm because warmth is their natural state when they are not threatened. The shadow empath stays warm as a strategy for managing the distance. Same actions. Completely different inner world is what I want you to understand about what the avoidant is really looking for, because this is the piece that makes everything else make sense. The avoidant is not looking for someone who loves them enough to accept all of their patterns. They have had those people. They have had the patient ones, the forgiving ones, the ones who absorbed years of inconsistency and called it loyalty. And they did not heal in those relationships. They continued running. Not because those people didn't love them, because the love, however genuine, came from a place of need. And need, to the avoidance nervous system, is a chain. However kindly attached, however well-intentioned, a chain. What the avoidant is looking for, and most of them don't consciously know this, which is why they keep ending up in the wrong relationships, is someone who wants them without needing them. Someone whose world is complete whether the avoidant shows up fully or not. Someone for whom the avoidance withdrawal is not an emergency because this person has enough in their own life to stay warm during a winter they didn't cause. That person does not suffocate the avoidant with love. They offer it the way sunlight is offered. It is there, it is genuinely warm, and it does not require anything from you in order to keep shining. And you can step into it or not. The choice is yours. And the choice being genuinely yours, with no penalty for not choosing it, is the thing that finally makes the avoidant want to choose it. Because what the avoidant has never trusted in love is that the option is real. That closeness is actually optional. That the other person's okayness does not depend on the avoidant's constant presence. They have never believed that because it has never been true. Everyone who loved them eventually needed something from them in return for that love. And the anchor empath is the first person who demonstrably, verifiably, over time, doesn't. Not because they feel nothing, because they feel everything and have learned to hold it in themselves instead of outsourcing the holding. And that is not coldness. It is not withholding. It is the most advanced form of emotional generosity there is. It is the difference between giving someone water from a full vessel and giving them water from an empty one. The anchor empath gives from fullness, and the avoidant, who has been watching people give from empty vessels their entire life and witnessing the resentment and the collapse that always follows, has never been given water from a full vessel before, and it tastes different, and they don't want to stop drinking. This is the thing about the avoidant that breaks the heart a little once you really see it. They are not closed. They are waiting. Underneath all the competence and the self-sufficiency and the patterns that keep everyone at a manageable distance, they are waiting for the person who will make closeness feel survivable. Not safe in the easy sense, survivable, possible, real. They have talked themselves into believing that person doesn't exist, that what they need cannot actually coexist in another human being, the combination of genuine warmth and genuine independence, that they are asking for something contradictory, and so they stay in the in-between. Capable of connection, terrified of it, running from anyone who offers it and mourning everyone who leaves. Until the anchor empath arrives, and doesn't leave, and doesn't pursue, and simply, steadily, with maddening completeness, continues to be entirely themselves. And the avoidant, who has a defense built for everything, has no defense for that. The last thing I want to say is also the most important thing, and it is not really about the avoidant at all. Becoming an anchor empath is not something you do to make someone love you. If you do it as a strategy, it won't work. Not because the techniques are wrong, but because the avoidant will read the strategy. The avoidant always reads the strategy. What the avoidant cannot read, what dismantles them completely, is reality. The genuine reality of someone who is whole. And you cannot fake wholeness. You can only build it. And the reason to build it is not the avoidant in your life right now. The reason to build it is everything. It is the quality of every conversation you have from the inside. The experience of your own emotions as information rather than emergencies. The ability to sit with discomfort without immediately needing to resolve it through someone else's reassurance. The freedom of not monitoring yourself constantly against the temperature of other people's responses. The experience of your own company as something worth having. All of that is what is actually on offer here. The avoidant is just the situation that made you curious. You are the destination. The work is not complicated. It is the daily, unglamorous, deeply unsexy practice of catching yourself mid-shrink and not finishing the movement. Of noticing when you are about to modify your truth to protect someone else's comfort and choosing, this time, to say the true thing. Of building evidence, one small interaction at a time, that you can be exactly yourself and the right people will move toward you and the wrong ones will leave, and both of those outcomes are survivable and one of them is actually good. That evidence accumulates, slowly, and then not slowly. And then one day you realize you stop tracking the temperature in the room because the room is not the source of your warmth anymore. You are. And from that place, quietly, without announcement, without strategy, you become the most magnetic version of yourself that has ever existed. Not because you changed who you are, because you finally stopped leaving.